But I just want to highlight this issue. I promised the leadership of ICE that I would raise this. I'm deadly serious about it. It is vital to them that we get answers about this.
Senator Hawley.
Chairman, two comments about oversight. The first is I just want to associate myself with Senator Johnson's remarks about the need to make sure that we're conducting oversight and that the statutes actually being followed and the agencies are appropriately responding to us. On a similar point, I want to mention an amendment that I had intended to offer today if the underlying bill had been offered related to ICE. And I want to thank the chairman for working with me on this. I brought this up in the hearing for Mr. Gonzalez and again with Secretary Mayorkas. ICE is reporting to members of this committee and to me that they are being discouraged from actively pursuing arrests in the interior of this country, and in particular that DHS has set up a new pre-clearance system called the Arrest Authorization Request Tool that requires ICE officers to submit documentation before they make an arrest, to get approval from superiors before they make an arrest. And ICE officers have told me, and I know other members of this committee, that this is seriously hampering their efforts. I think it is absolutely vital. And by the way, Mr. Chairman, we can see that in the number of arrests, down to 2,500 per month in the early months of this administration compared to 10,000 in previous months. The ICE union is strongly asking for transparency to find out how many times an ICE officer has asked to make an arrest, and that request has been denied under this new guidance issued by the administration and under the new system, the pre-clearance system that is set up. Now, Secretary Mayorkas, when I asked him about this, acted as if he didn't know anything about it. When I asked about specific instances that, by the way, were brought to me and to Senator Langford and others on this committee by ICE, he said he didn't know anything about it. I think this committee needs to find out how many times ICE officers have asked to make arrests and they have been denied by their leadership pursuant to these guidelines in this new system. Now, I've discussed this with the chairman. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for working with me on this. I know that we're trying to get answers here. I understand that DHS does not want to give us this information. They've used a lot of excuses. Unfortunately, DHS has a history of using excuses to this committee, and it spans administrations. We've seen it from the previous administration too. But I just want to highlight this issue. I promised the leadership of ICE that I would raise this. I'm deadly serious about it. It is vital to them that we get answers about this. Their leadership is asking for it. Their membership is asking for it. I think it's a critical part of the work of this oversight committee. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for working with me on this. I hope we can find some way to get this information so that we can conduct oversight and figure out what the heck is going on at ICE. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Sinema.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to talk about this issue for a moment briefly because while I don't disagree with Senator Hawley's concern about the issue, I do want to be clear that this was a hostile amendment to a very bipartisan bill, the Shadow Wolves bill, and it's an amendment that is unrelated to the substance of my legislation. So while I also want to work with the chairman and Senator Hawley to find resolution and get these answers, I do want to note that I'm disappointed that there was an attempt to add a hostile amendment to my bill without speaking with me or asking me about it. I'm known as someone who wants to work very closely with others to find bipartisan agreements. And I am unfortunately very disappointed that my bill is not moving forward today because of this attempt to attach an unrelated issue. I will continue to work together to get these answers, but I am disappointed about this.
Mr. Chairman, I'm surprised to hear that, Senator Sinema, because my staff and your staff have discussed this frequently. And I'm happy to take a vote on the amendment. My understanding is you didn't want to vote on this amendment, so therefore you withdrew your bill. I'm happy to have a vote on this amendment today. But I made a commitment to the men and women of ICE that I would stand up for them, and I'm going to keep that commitment. And I'm happy to work with you, and we have been working with you. So I don't know if you were looped into those conversations or perhaps not. All I can say is my staff has attempted to work with you and the chairman, and I'm happy to continue doing so. But I think this is an important part of our oversight commitment, and I made a commitment to the men and women of ICE, and I'm going to keep it.
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Senator Sinema.
I share that commitment to the men and women of ICE, and as you know, many of the men and women of ICE live and work in my state. So this is a relationship that we have that is close and that is based on trust. I want to find a solution. I am disappointed that we're moving forward today without resolution on this issue, which prevents my bill, which is a bipartisan bill, from moving forward. So while I remain committed to solving this problem, I do want to reiterate that this was an amendment that didn't need to be attached to my bill. It can be a separate piece of legislation. I'd be more than happy to work with you. I will continue to work to solve this problem. But I was disappointed at an attempt to address a separate issue on a very bipartisan bill concerning our shadow wolves. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Scott.
Sure. First, I voted no, but can you mark me down as a no on S-2525?
You will be marked no on S-2525.
Second, I want to just follow up with what Senator Johnson brought up. So I got elected as governor at the end of 2010, and what I heard when I became governor of Florida is that the state agencies weren't providing information to the state legislature. And, just coming from the business world, I mean, we all relied on everybody having good information so we could make good decisions. We didn't think that one department was different than another department. We tried to share all the information so we could make good decisions. So what I told all the agencies is I said, if people ask you for information, I don't have anything to hide. If people disagree with what I'm doing, I mean, I'll tell them why I'm doing it, and I can defend why I'm doing it, but I'm going to give people good information. So one thing I found up here is I'm very disappointed how much administrations, and because I've dealt with 2 different administrations, don't give information out. I mean, it's ridiculous. We have the opportunity to get that information. We need to, and it shouldn't be whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, give us the information. We get to make the decision what we do with it, but they shouldn't be hiding the information or making it difficult for us to do our job because we don't have enough information. So and when these nominees come in front of me, I ask them, on top of other questions, 2 things. I mean, are you going to comply with the law? And are you going if I ask for information, are you going to give it to me? Of course, they all, trying to get our votes, they all say yes. And so, so why wouldn't people give us this information? When they don't, what's your expectation? They're hiding something. I mean, how's that fair to us trying to do our job, each represent our state? So I hope you'll take seriously what Senator Johnson brought up, and we make these people give us the information. And we'd all like everybody to do something perfect, but if they're not, maybe we can help them do their jobs better. But I think it's ridiculous that people don't give us information.
Senator Scott, I couldn't agree with you more. We absolutely have to have that information, and it shouldn't matter if it's a Democratic or a Republican administration. Senator Hawley in his comments mentions the difficulties this committee had with the previous administration, including a previous administration that ignored subpoenas as well. That's unacceptable. And I'm committed to working with everybody on the committee and Senator Johnson. This is about the institution of the Senate and our ability to be able to get information that we need to conduct our oversight. It's fundamental to this democracy, this republic, that we're able to do that. So I think we need to be thinking about this in a comprehensive way and think through how we actually get enforcement. And I'm sincere in saying that we need to work together, and I'm looking forward to working with both of you.
Real quick.
Yes.
If somebody doesn't comply with this subpoena, what's our authority? What can we do? Because that's wrong.
Yeah.
Is there nothing we can do?
Well, you can enforce in court, but we know how difficult that was from the previous administration, as you know.
Yeah,
Senator Johnson?
Well, let me quick answer that question. That's the problem. We have no enforcement mechanism. So, again, I issued a subpoena. It wasn't complied with. But unless you can get the entire Senate to vote contempt against that individual and then get the Justice Department, oftentimes the same administration, to actually prosecute that individual, nothing happens. So, again, administrations realize congressional oversight has no teeth. So in this instance, what would be powerful, I think, right now, Mr. Chairman, is if maybe you and I get on a phone call. One thing, by the way, one thing I did when I became chair and I started issuing oversight letters, it's just kind of what ended up happening is the general attitude is you ask for the kitchen sink. It's just, millions of documents. The first thing I did with my staff said, no, I only want you to ask for what you're going to review. I don't want to go on huge fishing expeditions. Target what you're asking for, okay? And only to the extent that you're going to look at it. I don't want box loads full of information that nobody's ever going to look at, okay? I want the administration agencies to actually be able to work and do their job as opposed to comply with just congressional oversight. But congressional oversight is important. So again, I've always tried to, as best as possible, tailor my oversight request to only the information we need. In this case, for example, with the Fauci emails, they're already there. All they have to do is send them to us unredacted, which is what they should do. And again, if there's something having to do with national security, I can't imagine there is, make them available to us in the SCIF. So I would think would be quite powerful is if you and I schedule a call with Director Collins or HHS Secretary Becerra, and we ask him, please do this. This is a bipartisan request. We don't necessarily have to ratchet up to a subpoena, but let's let them know on a bipartisan basis we are going to stand up for our congressional oversight responsibility and obligation and right. Again, we are acting on behalf of the American public and the American public's right to know what's happening in government, what's happening in these administration agencies. The American people have a right to know what Anthony Fauci might have been funding when it comes to gain of function. They have the right to know to what extent CDC was working with teachers' unions when they were producing their school reopening guidance. That issue is going to come up again now here in the fall. So, I mean, I'm happy to work with you if you want to get on a phone call and let these agencies know, no, this is a bipartisan request, and if you don't comply, we're just going to start ratcheting up the pressure on a bipartisan basis. That is the best way to reinstitute the power of Congress in terms of congressional oversight, which right now is very weak. I mean, I certainly felt it during my 6 years of chairmanship. I think all of us, when we put in our oversight requests, see Senator Ossoff is still here, chairman of the PERM Subcommittee Investigations. You're witnessing it right now. You're experiencing it right now. It's very difficult to get information. That has to end. The American people have a right to know these things. And it's our responsibility to stand up for their right to know. So, again, I really would like to work with you. This is incredibly important, and there should be nothing partisan about this. Even though maybe the issues might be partisan, there's nothing partisan about Congress's ability and our responsibility to get this information the American public's right to know.
Well, as I mentioned, I'm happy to work with you. I think we need to work as a committee on this issue because this is a really big issue. It's not just about one specific request, and I understand how important that is to you, but this is broader as well for repeated requests. That
would be, my amendment would just simply fund those from the unobligated funds for the American Rescue Plan. It's a pretty simple amendment. But while I have the floor here, I do want to speak to another issue that I think is important to this committee. This committee is the Senate Oversight Committee. When I was chair for 6 years, I know there was some support for investigations, some of my oversight, sometimes there wasn't. But when we have hearings on nominees, we ask them a question whether or not they will comply with legitimate congressional oversight requests. And they always say yes, and that's also true of, for example, the HELP Committee. 5 senators from this committee sent letters to the NIH and the CDC, and then separately to the CDC and HHS. And we invoked 5 U.S.C. 2954, which states that an executive agency on request of the Committee on Homeland Security or any 5 members thereof shall submit any information requested of it relating to any matter within the jurisdiction of this committee. Now, again, this committee has broad oversight jurisdiction. We have not gotten those oversight letters responded to, not effectively, not in a complete format. Mr. Chairman, I sent you a letter, also signed by 5 senators, requesting that you utilize this committee's power to compel the agencies to follow the law. They shall supply the information. Now, I just want to use one example, a letter we sent to HHS Secretary Becerra requesting the unredacted emails from Anthony Fauci that were provided under a FOIA request to a number of different outside groups. We requested those same emails unredacted. By the way, congressional oversight is not subject to the redactions under FOIA. We should have received those completely unredacted. Proof of the fact that the redactions are not valid. I just have copies of one of the emails. This is an email from Peter Daszak dated April 18th, and it's just thanking Anthony Fauci for basically covering for Eco Health Alliance. You can see in what was produced to the committee and in the FOIA request, we have a big old redaction here. And now it was redacted supposedly because it was related to an open law enforcement investigation. We basically got the same 4,000 pages, the 5 senators, except on this one email, they failed to redact that. So now we know what's under the redaction. Let me just quick read you what supposedly was related to an open law enforcement investigation. It says, it has been a very hard few months as these conspiracy theorists have gradually become politicized and hardened in their stance, especially because the work we've been doing in collaboration with Chinese virologists have given us incredible insight into the risks that these viruses represent so we can directly help protect our nation from bat-origin coronaviruses. We're fighting to keep the communications open with our Chinese colleagues so that we can better address future pandemics like COVID-19. I have no idea why that would be redacted in an oversight response to Congress. I have no idea how that paragraph could be related to an open law enforcement investigation. So I won't go in, I won't describe this any further other than to, again, make the point. This law that we are invoking that tells the agencies they shall turn over this information, this is a 100-year-old law. It's been modified 2 times, most recent time in 1994, signed by Bill Clinton. The Supreme Court has affirmed Congress's need to have information to write effective legislation. For too many years, and again, I was the brunt of it for 6 years as chairman of this committee, government agencies, regardless of the administration, have thumbed their nose at congressional oversight. They just simply refuse to comply. So we end up being completely ineffective in an incredibly important constitutional duty and responsibility of Congress. Now, again, there is no reason. They have the emails. All they have to do is provide them to the 5 senators who have requested them in an unredacted fashion. By the way, our other oversight request is to CDC regarding any contact between the teachers' unions and CDC regarding their reopening of school guidance. Was that based on science? Was that based on political pressure? I think the public has a right to know. So again, as the Senate Committee on Oversight, if we sit back and do nothing, administrations in the future, regardless of whether they're Republican or Democrat, whether Democrats are in the majority in the Senate or Republicans are, administrations will continue to ignore our oversight requests, and we will not be able to fulfill our constitutional duty and responsibility to our constituents. So I would hope that every member on this committee would join those 5 senators that join me and use this committee's power to subpoena those records to say in a very strong, unified, unanimous voice, Congress will not be ignored. Our oversight responsibilities are important. And we demand, we insist that the administration provide us this information. But, Mr. Chairman, I'm asking that you work with me to prepare a subpoena. Hopefully, we don't even have to vote on it. You have the power to issue it. I would certainly hope that Senator Portman would not send a letter of disapproval, but we can get this subpoena out forthwith and fulfill our constitutional responsibility to oversight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. And certainly I concur that we need to get information. We need to do our job here as an oversight committee and make every effort to make sure we're getting information necessary to conduct oversight. And I'm happy to consider any requests. I'm happy to continue to work with you on this issue as well, because I think it is something that we need to pursue. But I'm going to note that you requested the documents under 5 U.S.C. Section 2954 in December, and the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals held that Section 2954 confers standing on a minority of members of the committee to obtain agency information. But the court recognized that the statutory right conferred by Section 2954 is entirely distinct from the committee's subpoena authority, and use of subpoena is inconsistent with this authority that you're invoking. That's my understanding of the law, but I'm happy to continue to work with you.
Again, we can put pressure on the agency from using that statute or committee subpoena.
Well,
So again, the way to affirm congressional's right to this information is for this committee to act separately from our request and support what we're trying to do here. Because if we don't, administrations of the future can continue to thumb their nose, and we might as well close up shop from a standpoint of oversight.
well, as I mentioned, Senator, I'm happy to work with you. We're going to continue to work together on this.
Appreciate that.
That's my intent. If there's no further debate on the amendment, is there any further debate on the Johnson amendment? Senator Ossoff.
Mr. Chairman, just want to take the opportunity to introduce the committee to this bill, and I'll then speak to Senator Johnson's amendment. This is S-2305, the Cybersecurity Opportunity Act. This is a bipartisan measure that I'm offering with Senator Tillis that we have developed jointly. I want to express my gratitude to the chairman as well as Ranking Member Portman and to Senator Scott for their involvement and contributions to the drafting of this legislation, which seeks to address an issue of vital national security concern. We've heard over the last several months, amidst continued increased tempo of cyber attacks and ransomware attacks targeting the public and private sectors in this country, from SolarWinds to the Colonial Pipeline, about the need to increase our production of a qualified cybersecurity workforce. And the lack of qualified cybersecurity professionals is a national security vulnerability for this country. So this legislation empowers the Department of Homeland Security to award grants to institutions of higher education that have an enrollment of needy students, and to historically black colleges and universities and minority-serving institutions to establish and expand cybersecurity programs that will help these institutions produce qualified entrants into the cybersecurity workforce and help these institutions become national centers of academic excellence in cybersecurity. Again, this is a bipartisan bill that I'm offering with Senator Tillis. Senator Scott has played a vital role in contributing language and improving the quality of this legislation to ensure that there's strong evaluation of its effectiveness and that the recipients of these grants are reporting back to the federal government on their performance and their execution of activities under this grant. And I would request my colleagues, in the spirit of the bipartisan sponsorship of this bill, to join me in a unanimous bipartisan vote in support. With respect to Senator Johnson amendment, which I appreciate, I would just note, Senator, that this grant program, which has a 5-year sunset, the provision that you offer would require the use of American Rescue Plan funds, but the ARP section referred in the amendment sunsets in 2023. So we would be unable to use those funds for the purpose of this legislation, and therefore I think the amendment would not achieve any plausible objective, but I certainly appreciate you offering it, and I'll humbly ask my colleagues to join me in opposing it. Thank you.
Senator Carper, you're recognized.
I'm not sure if this is Senator Ossoff's first bill that's come before this committee for a vote, but I think he's been in the Senate now for about 6 or 7 months, and one of the early lessons that I learned here is bipartisan solutions are lasting solutions. I'm pleased that you've got a couple of disreputable Republicans, no, just kidding, as your wingmen on this bill. Thank you. Workforce is so important, particularly in the cyber area. We always need to do better. And I commend you on the thrust of the legislation. I commend you on reaching out to both sides of the aisle to garner support, and look forward to supporting your bill. Thank you.
Thank you.